All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, it's almost cliche at this point to say that the media probably loved Trump more than Trump even loved himself because of how much they needed him. Many in the industry, they would protest vehemently at that notion. They were saying they were doing well because people simply loved journalism or that they were innovating. But now that we're at a full 50 days or so into the Biden era, the numbers are in, and we can say with relative certainty, Trump was right about one thing. The media is screwed without him. A new analysis by Variety reveals the depth of just how destroyed primetime CNN, MSNBC, and Fox are compared to the Trump era. CNN's Don Lemon's audience for the week of March 1st through 5th was 2/3 his audience from the week after the election. Anderson Cooper, right there next to him, as well as Chris Cuomo. But don't worry, it's not just CNN. They just happen to be more screwed. MSNBC's Chris Hayes suffered a 17% drop alongside a 10% drop for Laura Ingraham. But even that almost misses the point. In the critical key demographic, which is relied upon by these cable news organizations to appeal to advertisers, Chris Hayes is down 30%. Lawrence O'Donnell, 27. Don Lemon, 28. Laura Ingraham, 14. Anderson Cooper, 32. Sean Hannity, 17. Make no mistake, it's not even that Fox is suffering less. It's that their numbers went down already after the election when they refused to endorse Trump's claims that the election was stolen. That's just cable news. Elsewhere in more legacy digital media, things are crumbling. BuzzFeed fired 47 staffers at the Huffington Post, some of whom were friends of mine. And last week, I am not celebrating their decline, but as I am with cable news, I am merely pointing out the state of the media business is in major flux right now. And as I have said here now for months, the real war for independent media is only now just beginning. Now that corporate media organs are not propped up with a flush of cash from their Trump bump, they are looking around and noticing that independent-minded people are doing pretty well while they're getting laid off and have millions of people turning off the TV. And like their guild predecessors in the Industrial Revolution, they are doing everything they possibly can to destroy their competition using their established mainstream porches with the nastiest tactics in the book. This war broke out again into the open as a result of the Taylor Lorenz fracas that I covered here last week. For those who don't know, it's a simple story. Glenn Greenwald, Tucker Carlson, and others called out New York Times reporter Taylor Lorenz for trying to make International Women's Day about herself, having to read some mean tweets and push back against several things she's gotten flat wrong or outright destroyed people's lives for no reason. This prompted the corporate press to rally around Lorenz and accuse them of harassment, which is neither here nor there. But what really took the fight to the next level was Ryan Broderick. He's a former BuzzFeed reporter who wrote that Substack, which houses many independent journalists, is becoming home to, quote, right-wing culture warriors who are, quote, using Substack to network and organize. Oh my God, network and organize. Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi also are right-wing culture warriors? God, these people are idiots. What's insidious, though, is the obvious implication of that tweet and that story. They want Substack to begin to censor content on its platform that directly competes and points out the flaws in the corporate media. That is their ultimate goal. They are using identity language, as they always have, in order to try and get that done. The real irony is that Ryan Broderick, the guy who wrote this terrible piece, was literally fired last year from BuzzFeed for serial instances of serial plagiarism. Just a bit too rich. A journalist fired for being a plagiarist, campaigning to get real journalists who both broke their own news and fact-checked the corporate press taken off a platform which enables their work. Almost too perfect. Ryan's sins, though, are forgiven, because even though he violated the cardinal rule of being a journalist, he is at his heart a guild man, and the guild will take any enforcers that it can take. I expect this to be the very first shot across the bow of many. As the corporate press self-immolates from lack of Trump and their own woke ideology, like what's going on right now at Teen Vogue, they will come with even stronger force against the independent organs that are successful and thriving. All of these calls for deplatforming will come under the guise of protecting journalism or defending against harassment, or of saying Substack or other platforms are enabling misinformation. Remember to never, ever accept their terms of these debates, because don't forget, they are the ones who get to define misinformation to mean anything they don't agree with, or harassment as rightfully being outraged at their many mistakes. I expect this shot fired to only be the first of many, and I think the war will be bloody. Sadly, I'm sure they will succeed in many ways. But in the long run, I've never actually been more optimistic about breaking the corporate media stranglehold, because they can only keep up a fake facade for so long while the rest of us learn to think for ourselves. I think it's pretty astounding, Crystal, to see the Don Lemon one makes me the most happy, because I do think this is the worst show that is out there. A 1/3 drop. Anderson Cooper in the key demo, same thing. All of them. And as we were talking about, it's not that Fox is doing better. They were just already screwed.
They were ahead of the curve and
they
getting
were ahead
screwed.
of the curve and getting screwed because they didn't do Stop the Steal. All of them are down. The key demo, everything is down. And then you see in the press, like the Huffington Post layoffs. Again, I like many of the people who were fired. I feel terrible for them. But it's just going to create more of an environment where everybody, it's like on a sinking ship. And so they look out there at the little lifeboats that people have built and actually doing pretty well. And they're all going to scramble to sink them because they're like, if we're going to go down, we have to try and use your supplies to rebuild our ship. That's effectively what is happening. And they want to destroy their competition before they basically get to a point where they may eclipse them. I'm not saying it's there yet. I'm saying if you were to look 15, 20 years down the future, I would not bet on cable, and I would not bet on many of the people who are doing these hall monitors. But this is what is happening, and we have to really be careful about where it's headed.
Cable was totally screwed before Trump. I mean, they were screwed.
Yeah.
They had no idea. They were all scrambling. Oh, what do we do for these cord cutters? Their ratings are falling. Their business model's falling apart. They were completely hosed. And then Trump came in and he rescued them. They had endless content to freak their viewers out, or on Fox News, endless content to, freak them out in the other direction. And now that he's gone, they're really stuck. I mean, they lived off the fumes of like January 6th riot, and they're going to talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene and QAnon till they're blue in the face and get what they can out of it, but it's just not the same. It's really maybe the best thing about the Biden era is, and look, they're a victim of their own messaging around like, everybody go back to brunch. And so it's not just cable news, but all sort of political news consumption is way down. And that is probably a much healthier place ultimately to be. With regards to Substack, I knew it was only a matter of time. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came for Substack, because there's too many people on there who they don't like because they speak their mind and they criticize them and all of that. And so it was totally inevitable that the knives would come out ultimately for Substack. And look, here's the bottom line is a lot of these places, they have forced themselves into a corner of being super boring and predictable.
Exactly.
Like, every single segment, what this one's going to say, what that one's going to say, what the framing of the segment is going to be. It's just super boring.
So boring. It's terrible.
It's not interesting. Yeah. It's not original. And so in these little ecosystems where there's anything potentially interesting or edgy going on, they're like, we got to clamp down on this. If I have to be boring, you have to be boring and fit in this little box as well. I think ultimately, like you said, while they will win some battles, they're clearly losing the war.
Yeah.
And the success of so many writers outside of these mainstream outlets speaks to the fact that this train has left the station. People are looking for something different. And now that you actually have some of the less sort of politically committed voters tuning out political news, it's never been a better time to be in an independent space where you have a real critique of the Biden administration based on facts, based on evidence, based on some leftist critique, just a different heterodox view. It's actually never been a better time to be in that lane.
It really hasn't. And one of the most revealing things, Glenn wrote about this in his piece that I put up there, is that the thing that they always say is that this isn't real journalism. And it's so revealing because it shows that they don't think of what people on Substack do as real journalism, because when they are hall monitors, when Taylor Lorenz is a hall monitor and reports on Mr. Beast when he said he was like 19 years old, that's journalism. But when you point out Taylor Lorenz's lies and mistakes, no, that's
doesn't
not
count.
journalism.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting how the standards have happened here. Oh, so when CNN reports on Fox, that's called journalism. That's media reporting. When you report on CNN, that's just lies, harping, and criticism. Well, which is it, guys? And they can't pick. They don't regard real journalism, or they don't regard journalism happening on Substack as real because simply they're not within the guild. It's all, like, when you start to think of it as guild protectionism, as it was, like I said, during the Industrial Revolution and all that, it makes total sense. You want to use your collective bargaining power, basically, in terms of your cultural cachet, day, and even though your power is eroding, you have a lot of institutional credibility, you use that to try and destroy your opponents. But in the long run, I think it's inevitable. Will they win? I do think they will win some battles. I think some people will be probably unrightfully destroyed, taken off Substack or whatever. The amount of criticism is just too much for people who are in the mainstream to bear. That being said, though, we should fight against many of those things as strong as possible, because we know where they actually do want it to lead. They want it to lead so that Glenn and Matt Taibbi, anybody who criticizes them, is not allowed to speak. And that's just the worst place that we could end up.
Think about how insane it is to say what happens on Substack is not real journalism when you consider what David Sirota has done.
Yeah, of course. Right.
I mean,
he broke the the nursing home story.
Exactly
right.
Yeah. I mean, now this is like broken into the open, into mainstream, but David was out there almost completely alone on an island, breaking these stories before anyone else. And he has had a number of scoops like that. To dismiss that because he doesn't have the proper editing structure and a name brand behind him, completely insane and extraordinarily small-minded.
There you go.
Coming up, our friends Chuck Rocha and Philip Wegman join us for Team Rising when we return.